Hello, this is S.K. Williams, and today I would like to talk about something a little different than my usual fare, because I'm going to be talking about myself. And I'm also going to be talking about Yanderedev, also known as Alex Mahone. I've been thinking a lot about the Yandere simulator situation that I've been keeping up with, and even when I first heard about certain things a few months ago, and I haven't really been following the development of Yandere Simulator, but I've known it's had certain controversies over the years. But the last few months it heated up a lot. Well, I'm not really going to talk about much of that. This is a personal self-reflection about me, because about 6 years ago, I decided to transform my college coursework into an animated series, and I even began this YouTube channel specifically to host that animated series. But I never got around to it. I actually did some animation for my college series, which I've since scrapped. I've actually started over. I haven't given up doing my college series, though. For the last 6 years, I keep trying to get into it, and things just keep happening in my life. Over the course of 6 years, I've had health issues, trouble with real-world school, which will always take precedence over the fictional world that I've created, issues with friends, issues with family. A tree fell on my house, then 3 weeks later another tree fell on my house. While I was trying to work all of that out, my brother died. And I've been spending a great deal of time with my mother since then. So I really haven't gotten that far in my college series, and I really haven't developed my style on YouTube much. I think I have improved marginally, but in the course of 3 years of making YouTube videos, maybe 4 years at this point, I really haven't improved much. My early videos are not as good as my later videos, but there's only marginal improvement. But to be fair, cumulatively, I've only had about 6 months of experience making videos, and even then it's not 6 consistent months of doing so. So, in a way, much like Yandere Simulator, I've been working on a project for 6 years and have very little to show for it. So I can kind of sympathize with Alex Mahone when he says that these things can be more difficult than you realize. But I understand that some people say that it's different with him. For one thing, he took money, and I haven't asked anyone for any money. The closest anyone has given me to money for this project is when my mother bought a package on Reallusion's website of content and motions that I can use, because I'm using Crazy Talk Animator. But I think you can see that that's a little different, because my mother didn't buy me that package simply as an investment in the college series. That was a Christmas gift because I enjoy amateur animation, even though I'm not necessarily good at it. She would have gotten me that even if I wasn't working on the college series. But that doesn't change the fact that I haven't done as much. There's also other things people could say. Alex Mahone spends a lot of time streaming, a lot of time on Twitch. And I don't really know much about Twitch because I don't have a Twitch account since I don't do gaming. But from what I understand, Alex Mahone spends a lot of time on social media, which proves he can't be spending all of his time on the game. He's raking in a lot of money, he's difficult to work with, and he's not really putting as much effort into it as he claims. Which is a little different from me. Because while I've gone long stretches, even 6 months or so, without doing anything with the college series, it was because of outside engagements preventing me from doing anything with it, rather than simply because I'm lazy. I understand that. If someone wants to be critical of Alex Mahone, and assumes that I'm telling the truth about all of this, I am, but again, putting myself on an outsider's perspective. The truth of the matter is, I understand that there is a difference, and that Alex Mahone has asked for money and I haven't. This is basically Alex Mahone's job, and I'm doing it as a bit of a side project and hobby. That Alex Mahone claims to be working 10 hours a day and doing this explicitly and exclusively, non-stop, for years, not even taking a break or vacation. And when it comes to me, I just had things I had to take care of, and that just kept piling up and getting in the way. But it doesn't change the fact that I came up with my idea around the same time as Yandere Simulator was announced. And all I have is a handful of videos, less even than Alex Mahone has. It just has me thinking in a melancholic way about how you can plan something and it just not work out. I'm not saying you can't validly criticize Alex Mahone. That isn't the point of this video. I realize that he may very well not be working on the game like he says, and I understand that since he's getting paid a lot of money by supporters, and this is his full-time job essentially, that there is a difference. The college series was never my full-time job. It was never even a job. I never got paid for it. It was just something I wanted to do. And I do believe that perhaps Alex Mahone could have been better at how he managed his time, and he could have developed the game faster. I don't think all of the criticisms of him are invalid. But much like Star Trek, where people are critical of Lower Decks, more because they hate Star Trek Discovery and Picard, and, in a broader sense, hate what Hollywood in general is doing to old franchises. Even valid criticisms of Lower Decks are sometimes exaggerated beyond their means because people are already angry. I do believe Alex Mahone can be validly criticized for his time management and for not being entirely honest about how he uses his time and for not focusing on his job as much and for slacking off. And for other questionable practices I shan't mention on this channel right now. But at the same time, I don't think necessarily that it's all on that. I heard he suffers from mental illness. I've also heard that certain other things have been involved in his life, so maybe, even if it's just little things that wouldn't make the news, proverbially speaking, maybe not all of the criticisms are quite as valid as we think. And note, even a valid criticism can be taken too far. I mean, even something like Star Wars has criticisms in it that are not valid. A good example of that would be the infamous Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. There's plenty wrong with that movie, but there's also some things that aren't flaws. A good example of that would be the three most famous plot holes in the movie. One of the most famous plot holes is Maz Kanata told Poe, Finn, and Rose that only one man in the galaxy had the skill capable enough to break through the First Order encryption. And yet they just happened to find another man with those skills. The problem is this isn't a plot hole for two reasons. The first is, even if Maz told them only one man had the ability to do this, given that Maz Kanata is not omniscient, there could be other people that have these skills that she's simply unaware of. The second problem is that she didn't actually tell them that only one man had the ability to do this. She said there was only one man I trust with the ability to do this. There is a big difference between saying, there's only one man I trust who has the ability to do this, and saying, only one man has the ability to do this. And in the end, Maz Kanata was proven right, since DJ did betray them. The second plot hole that people point to is Vice Admiral Holdo not telling Poe Dameron her plan. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying I agree with her decision not to tell Poe, but it's not a plot hole. It's being misidentified as a plot hole. A plot hole is when the story contradicts its own internal logic. Like, if it was established that Princess Leia had, in fact, died in that explosion instead of Mary Poppinsing her way back to the ship, but then in a later scene she shows up and stuns Poe, and they give no explanation why she's back, that's a plot hole. It is not a plot hole to withhold information from someone, because that's mechanically possible. Nothing in the Star Wars world established that if Poe Dameron asks a question, you must answer it. There's some force that compels you to tell him. The force itself will make you answer Poe Dameron. I'm not saying her decision was good or smart or wise. I'm not saying it was a good movie. I am saying that it's not a plot hole. And there's the other plot hole that people will say that's not really a plot hole. And that would be, why would Rose trust Kylo Ren / Ben Solo when she just saw him murder his father? That's not a plot hole because it's possible to do that, and it is possible to make rash, rapid decisions. That doesn't mean you have to like it. I'm putting that out there. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I talk a lot about militant atheists on this channel, but they do the same thing. They'll misrepresent something the Bible says, and if you tell them that they're wrong, they will accuse you of using mental gymnastics, or they'll say that just because I disagree with your interpretation, you think I'm wrong. And it's really difficult to argue with that, because what they're basically saying is, I'm right. The Bible actually does say this, and you're interpreting it differently doesn't change the reality. My criticism is valid. And it's not really a discussion at that point, and often what they're criticizing isn't valid. Like, Skeptic's Annotated Bible has many Bible contradictions in it that basically run this way. I'm not giving you a real example, but it's the sort of contradiction. The Skeptic's Annotated Bible will note that there are several places in the Bible where it will say one man's father is this other man, but then it'll say the same man's father is someone else. Like, it'll say Peter, the son of Paul, in one verse, but then it'll say Peter, the son of John, in another one. And, of course, it presents this as a contradiction. But if you knew anything about ancient Near Eastern civilization, you will know they didn't have a term for grandfather or great-grandfather, and they simply referred to them all as father. Your ancestors could be your fathers as well. So, Paul could be the actual father of Peter, whilst John could be his grandfather, or even his great-grandfather. And you see this in other examples, like recently I got into a discussion with an atheist who said they preferred using the mustard seed example in Jesus' parable of the mustard seed to prove scientific flaws in the Bible, since apologists just can't make an excuse for that one that would work. The Bible is simply scientifically wrong. Never mind the fact that it's a parable. The truth is, the objection basically goes, mustard is not a tree. So when Jesus says a mustard seed grows into a mighty tree, he's mistaken. This is a scientific error. But in the Middle East, there is a mustard tree, and it grows about 25 feet tall. So this isn't a scientific error. There actually is a mustard tree. The same problem exists when they look at other things like bats or birds. The Hebrew word ophi just means has a wing, and even in English, they would often refer to any flying animal as a bird. The reason we don't think of bats as birds is because of modern classification of animals. And I'm not saying that in the past people thought bats were birds, but modern science later discovered bats are not birds. People knew that bats weren't birds in the way we mean it. We're not really talking about what they knew, though. We're talking about how they described things, and this is just a linguistic difference. The Hebrews were saying these things have wings, and were basically using a functional language set. And it's the same functional language set that we used throughout the 15 and even throughout most of the 1600s. And I say most of because I'm not saying around 1850 it started changing. It started changing around the late 1500s, early 1600s, but the changes took time to really take hold and were still permeated in society up until around the end of the century, maybe early 18th century. A lot of the things people complain about are petty things like that. Sometimes there's even legitimate criticism. Like with Holdo not telling Poe her plan. That's legitimate. But it's not a plot hole. And if you take it beyond, this is a stupid decision for a story, this hurts the narrative, to this is a plot hole, this breaks the logic of the world, this makes no sense, it's irrational, then you're no longer making a valid point. And if your point relies on projecting modern meanings of words onto historical texts, it's not really valid either. Which brings me back to Alex Mahone, and to myself. Alex Mahone probably is a combination of lazy and distracted. I do think he is working on Yandere Simulator. I also believe that he could be doing more. I also think that, in some ways, he may suffer from outside distractions that slow him down. I don't think they're as bad as he says. I do think he may be spending too much time on social media. But I don't necessarily think it's as bad as people say, which doesn't mean it's not bad. And as for me, maybe I could have done more with the college series, but my situation, like I said, is very different. I had real-life problems to deal with. But that doesn't mean that it's only those real-life problems, because sometimes I did get time off and thought maybe I should work on it, but then put it off and worked on something else, or just did nothing because I wanted to rest. You may say that's more understandable than with Alex Mahone, but it still happened. So it's not all regular life things stopping me. I probably could have done more. I don't know if I could have had a whole course, much less a whole series done, but I could have done more. Having said all of that, I just think it's interesting how people look at the world, and when they get mad at someone, they exaggerate how bad they are. But if they like someone, they exaggerate how good they are. But I also find it interesting that the bad is more often more grossly exaggerated than the good. I've always found it interesting how, also, from my own perspective, how I can relate to Alex Mahone not being able to finish in time, and how it takes so long to finish something you want to do, and how sometimes things get in the way. Even if I appreciate there are differences in situation, and even if I appreciate that the criticisms of Alex Mahone aren't quite the same as what happened with me, and that people can't level the same things with me. For instance, they can't say I'm scamming people out of money because I haven't gotten any. Which isn't to say I'll never put up a Patreon or anything, but I do at least want some product first. Still, it's interesting to think about. I haven't much else to say, so I'm going to sign off now. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and thank you for following the development of the Squills channel. Thank you. God bless, and goodbye.